in New York City experienced two very different political moments this week. In New York, Zoran Mamdani won the mayoral race in a historic victory for progressive Democrats. And at the same time, in French Cameroon, President Paul Biya was sworn in again under tight security as opposing groups protested and demanded transparency in the election process. We see that the two events, colonial French Cameroon, New York, raises a sharp contrast. What does it mean for a leader to claim a mandate through celebration or through force? As we saw in colonial French Cameroon and what we saw in New York City. This and more will be explored in today's Flash News. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Tabitha Akol. Let's begin. Dictator Paul Biya sworn in for eighth term amid disputed results, protests, and opposition's leaders' quest for accountability and transparency. After this swearing in, what next? We see that Paul Biya has been sworn in for a new 7-year term, extending his rule to more than 42 years. The 92-year-old president was declared winner of October's election, despite strong objections from the opposition, which rejected the result as fraudulent and described the process as a constitutional coup. Dictator Biya's inauguration took place in a heavily controlled and militarized Yaoundé, resulting and reflecting the tense political atmosphere. The public mood remains uncertain, particularly among the youth majority, most of whom have known no other leader in their lifetime. Sad. Now, what happens next, seeing what we are seeing right there on the screen? At 92, Paul Biya appears not to know where he is and what he's doing at his own swearing-in ceremony. An absenteeism president who is neither present and even oblivious of the internal power struggles and concerns of civilians. Now, let's take a look at this video on your screen. What would we say of a president like this? A president who doesn't even seem like he's present, who doesn't seem like he even knows what he's doing. He may be lost, maybe even has lost touch of himself and even the reality around him. Meanwhile, the war in Amazonia continues with thousands displaced and communities destabilized. Yet, Amazonians are still committed to the struggle for self-determination, not abated by a nation's consolidation of power like we have seen in this election.
Au Cameroun, 1, 2, 3, chant.
Oui.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay. Speak. Who can hear?
Who
can hear? Yeah. Speak here.
Understand me? So I am completely embarrassed because I brought some words to say. I would like to do this.
C'est important.
Les ministres de Goubi vous a introduit.
Je dois parler maintenant.
I mean, a funny watch of a president of a nation. Now, Paul Biya's new term would either bring a renewed dialogue, a continued military response. Are we going to see that in the coming days, seeing what we just saw right there? Will Biya seek negotiation or double down on force? Public discontent and economic stagnation, unemployment and rising living costs continues to fuel frustration, particularly among young people and political activists who argue that the election did not reflect the will of the people. Protesters in several cities expressed anger over what they describe as decades of political stagnation, corruption, and exclusion. Now, one of the most vocal critics in recent days has been General Valsiro, a well-known Cameroonian rapper and activist. In a widely shared video online, Valsiro accused the Biya administration of turning French Cameroon into a state controlled by a small ruling circle. Let's take a listen.
This Cameroon can no longer remain indivisible. No, we have to divide it. That is to say, people who tell you that Cameroon is one and indivisible, you have to stop that right away. You have to divide it. You have to divide it, because if it's just one person who has to enjoy Cameroon for 43 years, if it's just one family, just one group of people who have to enjoy Cameroon, enjoy life in Cameroon, enjoy the riches of Cameroon by oppressing Cameroonians, by trampling on Cameroonians, then no, we can no longer remain in the one and indivisible there. We can no longer remain in the one and indivisible where it's Paul Bengongo, Gregorona Fongo. For over 50 years in the press, people have been telling us that we are one and indivisible. No, no, we are not one and indivisible. We have to divide ourselves so that everyone can have something. When it is, and I understand why the Anglophones decided to divide the country, because they realized that for them to have something, the one is indivisible does not relate to the Cameroonian.
Now, right there, Valsiro also acknowledged for the first time in such clear terms that he now understands why Ambazonia breaks away. As he stated, his statement highlights a broader and increasingly open debate whether French Cameroon can remain unified under current political conditions or whether the push for separation will strengthen if reforms and dialogue fail. Now, why does Valsiro's statement matters at this time? For years, calls for separation were concentrated primarily in Ambazonia. They were the one who understood this movement. They were the one who understood the tactics French Cameroon has been playing over the years. However, Valsiro's remarks signal something politically significant. Frustration in the French Cameroon, the narrative of national unity under one leader is weakening. Opposition to Biya is shifting from quiet discontent to public defiance. All this situation hinges on whether the government opens space for political dialogue and how the security forces respond to protest movement in French Cameroon as it enters a period where public patience, state authority, and national unity will all be tested. Meanwhile, Biya's eighth term does not signal political renewal. It raises uncertainty about French Cameroon's future. The central issue is not just that a 92-year-old leader remains in power, but whether the state is prepared for a transition that preserves stability, legitimacy, and public trust. Well, the next few years will likely determine whether French Cameroon moves toward reform, deeper authoritarianism, or even a contested succession crisis. Now, away from what we're seeing from French Cameroon and taking you over to the election that just happened in the United States, in New York City, Mamdani's historic win set stage for a clash with Washington after Trump's "So It Begins." So now Zoran Mamdani has been elected mayor of New York City in a victory that has already reshaped the national political conversation and exposed sharp partisan divides. His win, celebrated by progressives and younger voters across the city, came despite public opposition from President Donald Trump, tech billionaire Elon Musk, and criticism from parts of the Democratic establishment. Now, let's take a look at Mamdani's victory speech. Let's take a listen.
If you want to see what congressional Democrats wish to do to America, just look at the result of yesterday's election in New York, where their party installed
Donald Trump. Since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
Tonight. Now, that's President Trump speaking right after Mamdani's historic victory in New York City. However, let's take a dive into the life of Mamdani. Mamdani is a Democratic lawmaker who who is leaning towards economy and socialism. Now, he has defeated his Republican opponent in what analysts are calling a decisive win for Democrats in one of the country's most watched local elections. Now, the race drew national attention after President Trump stated during the campaign that federal funding to New York City could be reconsidered if Mamdani took office, language his advisors framed as concern over radical fiscal priorities, but that Mamdani's supporters condemned as political intimidation. Now, shortly after results were announced, President Trump posted on his social media platform, and it begins. The message, brief and without further explanation, as well debate over whether the White House, the United States, intends to test the limit of federal authority over city budgets. In his surprise victory speech, Mamdani directly addressed Trump's earlier warnings, accusing the president of using the power of his office to threaten the people of this city, New York City, for choosing their own future. However, celebrations broke out in parts of Brooklyn and Bronx, while some business groups and moderate Democrats expressed concern over potential conflict between City Hall and Washington. So while the United States president cannot unilaterally cut most federal funding that has already been approved by Congress, federal agencies do hold power over what we can now see as discretionary grants, infrastructure approvals, housing, transit, and even education support programs. Policy experts note that an administration can slow, delay, or even tighten oversight of such funding, creating financial pressure without announcing a formal cutoff. So this situation is less about pulling the plug and more about turning the valve, said one local government analyst. A city like New York depends on predictable federal cooperation, not just money. Mamdani's rise exposed tensions within the Democratic Party itself. Former President Barack Obama made a call to congratulate Mamdani shortly before election night, but stopped short of issuing a public endorsement, an omission widely interpreted as an attempt to avoid deepening party fractures. Meanwhile, Elon Musk, the tech mogul who previously criticized Mamdani's economic proposals, reiterated that the new mayor's policies could damage business confidence. So after Mamdani has won, what next? What comes next? Mamdani enters City Hall, facing a potential funding standoff with Washington, a need to reassure business and civic groups, pressure from progressive supporters expecting immediate policy action. Also, political watchers say Trump's post signals not an immediate policy shift, but the opening of a long, highly visible power struggle. Federal-local conflicts may define the first year of his administration, said Dr. Leila Ramsey, a professor of public policy. The phrase, "so it begins," reads like the announcement of a political contest, but is it a political contest? Meanwhile, Mamdani's statement could spark Trump's post. How do we know about that? Let's take a listen.
Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
Tonight. 4 words. Turn the volume up. What could that mean for the president of the United States? However, President Trump's response had a tone shift when asked about Mamdani's victory speech in an interview with Fox News. Let's take a listen and hear what Trump had to say in response to Mamdani's speech.
A very dangerous statement for him to make, actually. And, you talk about danger. I think it's a very dangerous statement for him to make. He has to be a little bit respectful of Washington, because if he's not, he doesn't have a chance of succeeding. And I want to make him succeed. I want to make the city succeed. I don't want to make him succeed. I want to make the city succeed, and we'll see what happens.
What's the stakes? New York relies on federal support for housing, education, healthcare, and public transit. Any sustained slowdown in these areas could complicate Mamdani's ability to implement his campaign commitments, particularly those centered on housing affordability and public services. For now, Mamdani has signaled he is prepared. So how ready is he? Let's take a look.
It's bad. This one, we're going to look. For 1,000 years, communism has not worked. Communism, or the concept of communism, has not worked. I tend to doubt it's going to work this time.
Did you see his victory speech?
Oh, it's literally never worked. Yeah, I thought it was a very angry speech, certainly angry toward me, and I think he should be very nice to me. You know, I'm the one that sort of has to approve a lot of things coming to him, so he's off to a bad start.
But with Trump's message echoing across national media, the question remains whether New York is entering an era of political standoff, one where federal funding, city governance, and national ideological battles collide in full public view, like we have just seen with the president Mamdani issuing a turn the volume up to the president. And just shortly after that, the president votes. So it begins. What exactly? Now, taking our attention over from there and moving over to the Middle East. Kazakhstan entry into Abraham Accords could be a strategic shift in regional diplomacy for the Middle East. But let's delve into that. The United States President Donald Trump announced Thursday that Kazakhstan will join the Abraham Accords, making it the first nation to sign on during his second term. The agreement marks the very latest expansion of the U.S.-led initiative aimed at normalizing relations between Israel and countries across the Middle East and wider Muslim world. Let's take a look.
Abraham Accords, the Abraham Accord, and that those announcements will be made over the next little while. The Abraham Accords are very sought after right now. We're going to be announcing some very important countries that are joining, and for Jared and for Steve Witkoff, we appreciate the great job you've done. This evening, I'm also delighted to report that Kazakhstan has officially agreed, and that's official now, as of about 15 minutes ago. A tremendous country with a tremendous leader. Abraham Accords, the Abraham Accord, and that those announcements will be made over the next little while. The Abraham Accords are very sought after right now. We're going to be announcing some very important countries that are joining, and for Jared and for Steve Witkoff, we appreciate the great job you've done. This evening, I'm also delighted to report that Kazakhstan has officially agreed, and that's official now, as of about 15 minutes ago. A tremendous country with a tremendous leader.
The Abraham Accords were first established in 2020, leading to normalization between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. Sudan later joined in 2021. Kazakhstan's participation at this time introduces Central Asia into the framework at a time when regional realignment and alignment are under renewed scrutiny. Washington views the expansion of the Accords as central to stabilizing the Middle East and strengthening U.S. partnerships. The initiative is also a core element of Trump's diplomatic messaging as he seeks broader support among Muslim-majority states while advocating for an end to Israel's war in Gaza. According to the administration, Trump discussed the agreement during a call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Kazakh's President Kassym-Jomart. We see that this bettered a signing ceremony, and this signing ceremony is talking about the deal right here, and this is expected to be coming just weeks after the peace deal. Kazakhstan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has not yet issued a public statement. However, the development comes against the backdrop of ongoing tensions following the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack and Israel's military response. While public anger over the conflict remains widespread across the Muslim world, Existing signatories to the Abraham Accords have not withdrawn. Governments have continued to prioritize diplomatic and economic cooperation with Israel despite the humanitarian toll in Gaza. Kazakhstan's decision reflects its long-standing multi-vector foreign policy, balancing relationship with Russia, China, the United States, and key regional actors. Now, joining the accords may enhance its international profile, diversifying economic partnerships and secure access to new security and technology cooperation. However, major Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, maintain that full normalization with Israel remains contingent upon progress toward establishing an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. These conditions continues to be the central obstacle to wider adoption of the Accords. As the Abraham Accords expand into Central Asia, can strategic and economic incentives continue to outweigh public pressure and unresolved political demands surrounding Palestinian statehood? United States military. Still, as we see that the United States is committed and devoted to ensuring the security of its allies, which is Israel. And this has bettered the peace deal in the Middle East. Now, moving over to the recent development in Nigeria and Trump's call and declaration of Nigeria as a state of particular concern. The United States military has developed contingency plans for possible strikes in Nigeria following President Donald Trump's designation of the country as a country of particular concern over alleged persecution of Christians. The Nigerian government has denied the allegations, arguing that ongoing violence is driven by terrorism and local grievances rather than religious cleansing. But is that true? Is that really true? Let's take a look.
Christianity is facing an existential threat in Nigeria. Thousands and thousands of Christians are being killed. Radical Islamists are responsible for this mass slaughter. I am hereby making Nigeria a country of particular concern. That's a legal definition. When the Christians or any such group is slaughtered, like is happening in Nigeria, 3,100 versus 4,476 worldwide. What horrible numbers. Something has to be done. I am asking Congressman Riley Moore, together with Chairman Tom Cole and the House Appropriations Committee, to immediately look into this matter and to report back to me. And I mean, like, immediately. The United States cannot stand by while such atrocities are happening in Nigeria and numerous other countries. It's not only Nigeria, it's all over.
According to reports by the New York Times, the United States Africa Command submitted 3 tiers of response options to the Department of War at the request of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The proposals include a heavy option involving deployment of an aircraft carrier group to the Gulf of Guinea and the use of long-range bombers to hit militant targets in northern Nigeria. Also, a medium option centered on drone strikes, and a light option focused on intelligence cooperation and support to Nigerian forces. President Donald Trump last week accused the administration of President Bola Tinubu of allowing the mass slaughter of Christians and said the United States was prepared to act. He also suspended arms sales and technical assistance to Nigeria. His statement followed months of lobbying by U.S. conservative lawmakers and Christian advocacy groups urging Washington to sanction Nigeria. The Nigerian government, in response, and independent conflict researchers maintain that the violence in the country is more complex. In the Middle Belt, clashes between farmers and pastoralists are driven by land use, climate stress, and local competition, while jihadist groups such as Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa province have attacked both Muslims and Christians across several states. Also in 2017, a bombing at a mosque in Mumbai and Damar State killed more than 50 people, while In 2018, double suicide attack at another in the state killed at least 86. Analysts say these incidents show that militant violence does not fit a single narrative of religious persecution. But is it true? We've seen in Nigeria, seen reports around the internet of Christians' churches being burned and killed, and Nigerian officials writing on the social media posting about the incessant killing, the mass atrocities of Christians in churches, Christians in their homes, in hospitals, and in several locations. And this catastrophic and disheartening situation has drawn the attention of the international community. However, what a military official saying, the military officials quoted by the New York Times warned that any large-scale U.S. action could mirror the prolonged campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. But what's the fear all about? Paul Eaton, a retired U.S. Army Major General, said an intervention would risk shock and confusion rather than stability, describing it as pounding a pillow, and therefore that extends and expands force without resolving underlying tensions. Also, operational challenges complicates the military options. The U.S. withdrew from its drone bases in Agadez and Niamey, Niger, earlier this year, and those facilities are now under Russian influence. The nearest viable U.S. bases are in Djibouti and southern Europe, which would significantly reduce strike efficiency. Meanwhile, the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford is being repositioned to the southern Caribbean, and other carriers are already committed to the Middle East and Pacific. So now, what do we say about the light option? This light option focuses on joint operations with Nigerian forces and is affected by the recent dissolution of the U.S. Agency for International Development, which previously provided technical and civilian security support. And even at this level of security, these mass atrocities are still on in northern parts of Nigeria, killing Christians. So if the conflict is driven by overlapping political, economic, and ideological factors, how effective at destabilizing might a U.S. military intervention be in resolving Nigeria's security crisis? A lot of persons have called for the U.S. not to intervene, but then Nigerians are crying out, please come to our aid. The coming days will definitely justify which of these options the United States would be adopting. Now, taking it over to North Korea. North Korea launched a ballistic missile on Friday toward the sea off its east coast. South Korea and Japan said, marking the latest in a series of weapons tests in recent weeks and coming shortly after U.S. President Donald Trump signaled openness to renewed talks with Pyongyang. Let's take a look.
I have a great relationship with Kim Jong-un. I hope it stays that way. I think it will. I have a very good relationship. I understand him. I spent a lot of free time with him talking about things that we probably aren't supposed to talk about. And, I get along with him really well. I think he has a country of great potential, tremendous potential.
Is it possible you meet him this year or maybe next year?
Well, I'm meeting a lot of people. I mean, it's hard to say that, but I'd like to meet him this year.
South Korea's military reported that the projectile, believed to be a short-range ballistic missile, was fired from North Korea's northwest region near the Chinese border and traveled around 700 kilometers. The launch was detected and tracked jointly by South Korean and U.S. surveillance systems, with information shared in real time with Japan. Japan said the missile likely landed outside its exclusive economic zone and reported no damage. However, President Trump, during a visit to South Korea last week, reiterated his readiness to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, raising a speculation of possible last-minute talks. Although no meeting took place, President Trump indicated he was willing to return to the region for discussions. Kim has not publicly responded, on the other hand, to the latest diplomatic outreach. However, Pyongyang's foreign ministry on Thursday criticized continued U.S. sanctions targeting North Korean officials and institutions, describing them as hostile and warning of a response. Meanwhile, earlier this week, United States Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to its security alliance with South Korea, saying the deterrence posture against North Korea remains central, even as Washington considers broader regional military adjustment. North Korea, on the other hand, has carried out multiple missile tests in recent months, including launches of what it described as a hypersonic system and sea-to-surface cruise missiles, ahead of a regional summit attended by President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is the report coming right here from North Korea and the nuclear war we're having with the United States, the world powers. But then we hope to see that this does not affect lives and even properties. Until next time, this is where we'll be drawing the curtain onto this flash news. Stay tuned for Horizon at the top of the hour, 6 p.m. I am Tabitha Ako. Thank you for staying with us.